Welcome back. I've got Celia Orsini online. Celia, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm looking forward to this conversation. You do some really amazing work. So why don't you share a little bit about you and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Right. I am a mum of two and owner of a small, very stimulating dog. I am a doctor in archaeology, and my first love was early medieval societies. And through time, it became a passion for identity processes and studying these formation processes. And I ended up building archaeology for well-being after COVID and after my first pregnancy because I used archaeology myself to help me through these time, and it became quite obvious afterwards that I needed to share that message that actually archaeology was a discipline that was relevant nowadays because it could help us so much improve our own mental well-being.
Yeah, there's structure to things and going back to medieval times and you study those things and you go, okay, what was the perspective? What were they thinking about this? Why did they choose this type of situation or layout? And it, a lot of people don't connect those dots between design of things, communities, and all that, but also design of your life. And I tell people, you are the architect of your life. And a lot of people don't recognize that. They think, okay, I go get a job, I work, I do this, and they control what I do. It's like, no, actually, you are in control of your life, what you choose, where you work, who you partner with, what kind of dog do you have, how many children do you want, where do you like going shopping? All these things are choices and
Yeah.
design. And I think too many of us just pretty much hit the autopilot button and we don't think about it or plan it. We just kind of go with the flow of things. And believe me, I'm a big fan of going with the flow, but also understanding that you choose what flow you operate in. And it's curious that, and I see this a lot with people that will go into a career and they'll get their degrees and, in your case, your doctorate in it. And all of a sudden start discovering, wait a minute, there's things to apply in this arena
Yeah.
over here. What was that like when you first made that, that I don't, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say transition. I want to say something along the lines when you discovered this and you go, okay, how do I apply this? And of course, we all know the pandemic created all kinds of opportunities for people to more or less reinvent themselves or maybe approach life a little bit differently than we were doing prior to spring of 2020. So love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm gonna highlight just a first thing because when we were talking, I was just thinking, oh wow, this is amazing because you're actually explaining what the definition of identity is to me. I often describe archaeology for well-being within three principles: contact, choices, and construct. So identity grows out and meaning grows out of contact. When we enter in contact with other people, with other culture, with other objects, we create meaning through contact. And we definitively create our identity. Archaeology highlights that identity is a matter of choice. Every decision you make to build your lifestyle to comes from choices you have made, profession you adopt, meal you cook, and finally, it is a construct because all of the things you will associate are your own very own little mix of ingredients. And that's not to say that there is no constraint coming from tradition, from the way you were raised, but at some stage you realize that there is things you inherit and you choose to keep and to propagate, and there are things you choose to avoid or innovation that you bring inside, and this makes the truth of yourself. This makes your identity so special and so unique. So I love the fact that you mentioned that people often forget that identity is a matter of choice, it is a construction. And we discover that in archaeology because we try to reconstruct the identity of other people in the past. So we look at their production, we look at the objects they produce, the object they use, how it influences the choice they make, how it influences the decor, how it influenced the landscape and the way they utilize the landscape. So these identity processes are there, have been studied for decades now in archaeology. And through that lens, I realized when it really started pre-COVID for me, I had a baby and it was wonderful. But I was also leaving far away from my family and living in a new town. And I realized that I was becoming more and more isolated and I was actually becoming lonely, although I had this child with me 24/7. So I forced myself to rediscover the joy of archaeology. And I was not thinking of anyone else than myself at that time. I was just trying to cultivate this spark, this curiosity. And I forced myself to go through the process of staying curious, going to heritage places, going to museum, and trying to bring it back into the conversation that I was having with myself, with others, with my baby. And it was tremendously useful. Then the pandemic hit, and it was just a whole different loads of issues to face, including for us moving back to continental Europe, first in France, then in Germany. So it was a lot of movement, a lot of new discovery, rediscovering France, rediscovering Germany, not having lived in continental Europe for so long. What had we forgotten and what we needed to re rediscover and re-encounter. And so all that played a part in the creation of archaeology for well-being. The use of heritage to improve your well-being is not my invention. It's the produce of over a decade of studies. A lot of organization use archaeology to help veteran reinsert community life or use it to learn and highlight their transferable skills. There is there is a lot of projects trying to make people aware of their heritage and how they can use it to improve their well-being. So I am just part of the the group of people trying to make you aware that your identity is for you to play with, and rediscovering your identity through the past and through your environment, whether you're an expat or not, is going to be tremendously useful. I wonder if I should add anything at that point where you're looking for.
No, I think that's great. Now, there's a couple things that come to mind. The first one was actually something I just wrote down, and we'll talk about this in a second. Is uh, the concept of transferable skills. Right
Mhm,
now, at the time of this recording, we know that AI is, front and center. A lot of people are talking about it. There's a lot of people afraid about it.
mhm,
There's a lot of people that are excited about, what it can do and innovations and streamlining a lot of the mundane types of tasks to get responses or at least idea creation. There's a lot of positives about it, but then of course there are the concerns like we have anytime there's innovation, is that yes, there could be some attrition with some jobs that It's like, well, AI will do it. And well, if AI can do it and do it well enough, then a lot of organizations will look at that as an opportunity to streamline things, reduce staff.
Of course,
So
yeah.
that's where transferable skills come into play. And again, going back to kind of what I talked about at the beginning, is a lot of us forget about the skills we have, and that we've picked up along the way. We don't really think about them. And
No, we don't.
when you were going through that, re-emergence or reintegration, when you moved back, it's like, okay, we got to rediscover relationships, rediscover friends that we had. Maybe those friendships aren't the same as they were before. I've seen that, personally in my own
Yeah, of
life,
course.
where we what's the word I'm looking for? We change a bit, and sometimes we we see people that we used to be really close with, and now we're not. And it's nothing personal. It's not like, oh, they did something to make me upset. No, a lot of times is we just people change and our interests change and what's
Yeah, we
important
grow.
to us,
Yeah.
and we grow. Yeah, I mean, a real example that I know that I had some, friends that I grew up with in high school and college and early adulthood, and we were all close. And then I moved away, and occasionally we'll make a cameo appearance in the community that they're in, and it's different. We're different. I'm different. They, from my vantage point, seem to be kind of in the same thing, but again, they may not be. It just may be my own mind saying they are where they are, and our interests may not be the same. So there's a lot there, but I think, as you were painting that picture, it's a challenge that a lot of people have, that eh, life has all these different ingredients to it, and when you're designing your life, sometimes those ingredients spill into the other areas that you're trying to make. So if let's say you're trying to make a cake, or you're making some type of a food dish, and for some reason you have an open container of paprika, and then all of a sudden it spills because you went to grab something and knocked it over, and now you have paprika in your dish. Well, depending on what you're making, it may not be a bad thing. If it's a cake, probably not, but who knows? It could be a real interesting discovery. Let me know how that works out for you.
Yeah.
I'm just my taste buds are going. I'm not
Mm,
sure if I want paprika in any type of baked good, but who knows? I'm sure there's recipes that call for it.
there must
Um,
be.
there has to be. Yeah, I'm sure there is. If not, and we can have AI create a baking recipe with this, and we'll see what kind of concoction. If I want to waste ingredients, maybe I'll do that one day. But getting back to what I'm talking about, I think probably what I'm really curious about is, because people in designing their life and all of that, how do they deal with these external things like AI that can potentially impact how they go about their life? Because right now it is definitely causing some disruption in certain areas for people. Software development, for example, is one area, but there's a lot of others. How do you mitigate those concerns? Because it's not the first time that in history that humans have had jobs, and those jobs no longer exist because we no longer need them anymore. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think I think AI is a hot topic at the minute, and I I agree there is a huge risk using AI and generalizing its use. And I think a lot of the fear will disappear once there is more training available to people, and also when there's more ethics and policies put into place to regulate the use of AI. So there's been recently some tumultuous thought in the world of archaeology, history of art, and creation in general, so artistic creation in general, because AI is taking over and producing things that would take much longer in general. It would take 6 months for a team to produce a design. AI arrives and it produces this functioning model. I think there's a distinction to be made between things that are functioning and things that should be in place. So, for example, in the case of artistic products, do we want something that is very personal and very emotionally linked to our subject, or do we just want a visual support? And I think ethics and ethical studies and the policies that will be put in place in the next couple of months, couple of years, will be tremendously important. I still think that now that AI is here, we have to deal with it. We can't just say, well, AI is bad, no one should use it. This is not for in my opinion, this is not viable. This is not a viable path to take. It's like saying, well, internet has brought down so much misery on us. Let's not use it anymore. This is not possible. Now, internet and internet connection are integral part of our work. We can't just say that it's not good enough, so and put it in the bin. And AI is the same. I think there is an amazing potential to help people. And as long as we reinsert those tools within social prescribing, there will be good coming out of it. And so I am still, maybe I'm an optimistic. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is terrible and AI will take over the world. But I think there is strategies to be put in place. There is policy to be made. There is ethics to follow. There is rules to follow. But AI still will be useful. If you think about all those communities that used to function completely around the extraction of coal, and this was the case in Britain, for example, in the northern part of Britain or in the northern part of France. And yes, the social impact of removing heating, cold heating from our usual heating system or has been tremendous and has been negative. And the way government handled this transition were not great. So let's use that. Let's use that kind of cases, that kind of things happening to prevent AI from impacting people so negatively. Let's be sure that we are aware that a new invention, an innovation of that grade, of that scale, can impact negatively people and need to be and there's a need for transitions, there's a need for training, there's a need for retraining, there's a need to highlight transferable skills and use that to put people that are at risk of losing their job into a situation where they can actually move on and move forward, not move on but move forward.
That's a great analogy, and it again it paints the picture in going back, centuries and millennia. There's always been transitions, and I love how you put this. Whenever we say, okay, well, we don't want to manufacture coal because of all the documented reasons why, and the health, the challenges, and all of that, and there are communities, and we know this that were born and built and thrived on that, and all of a sudden we're like, okay, we're just going to rip out your economic
Yeah.
background and economic situation to the point where you have zero industry now. Well, that's not the right approach. And I see it with EV vehicles, for example, especially in North America. There was a big push like, okay, we got to go there by this date, 2035, we're not going to do any more of those. Everything has to be EV. And I look at that and I'm like, I have no problem setting aggressive targets, understanding that we have to have a transition. Okay, what does that look like? Do we have the infrastructure in place? What does that do to other situations? How big of a spike will that draw on demand for electricity? What is that going to cost? Is that going to be cost prohibitive for people? You have to factor in all these things because a lot of times people will go, I like to call it that surface level or first layer thinking. It's like, okay, we want this. Okay, what do you need in order to imply that? What is the impact does that have on the lives of your communities around the world? All of that, and a lot of times we don't think that's like, oh yeah, that would be a great idea, but what does it take to do that? And I think that's where AI versus human. Not that I like to make that comparison, but I think where the human side of things is critically important is we can use the deductive reasoning skills and say, okay, AI told us this is how we do it. But what are the human costs on this? What does this look like? How can we implement this? And again, I love what you said before about it. It's like it's here. Don't stick your head in the sand and say I'm not going to use AI. Okay, well, we might see a time in a very short period of time that if you don't use AI, you're not going to be able to use a thing. Just like you said with the internet, you know how it. I think about, okay, if I didn't want to use my smartphone for something, okay, like going to the bank or depositing, money, like, okay, I can do a lot of that electronically. I don't have to go anywhere. I can do it right here. Well, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go physically go in. Okay, well, what does that take? All right, well, I have to go the hours the bank's there, stand in a line, and you look at that opportunity cost and go, okay, yeah, I didn't use the internet, but it took me 90 minutes to go do all of this when I could have done it in a minute. 89 minutes is a huge cost. What could you have done with that time? And I think that's we have to be more intentional about how we live and how we choose to live. And I think that's an area, again, going back to my autopilot comment, a lot of people just aren't. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fatigue and the trauma and the ongoing thing that this thing that we call life has been for a long time, not just the last several years, post pandemic and everything that's transpired since then, but it's again designing your life. You have to understand what your life is like and the life you want to have and where you are now and connect the dots. So, love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think there's something people forget. There was systemic problems before AI. So, for example, I've heard a very interesting and very relevant comment from someone working in the European Commission saying, highlighting the fact that AI was actually not helping women's cause because it was taught so much about inequality that he actually reproduced that kind of inequality in his comments, in the way he presents information. This is not AI's fault. The system was problematic before AI. So I think that's when the putting back human in the center of the system is going to be the best solution, the best approach, really. We have realized before AI that we needed empathetic leadership. We have realized before AI that we needed to take mental health into account. We had realized that we needed to take care of our workforce before AI was on the market. Now, it does not help to pretend that AI is a monstrosity that will eventually make our world collapse. It makes for a very great science fiction, and I love science fiction, so why not? But my point is, let's use AI to help solve those social problems. Let's use AI to make sure that we are able to make those lifestyle choices that you were mentioning. The point of technology was to make human life easier, to improve our quality of life. So let's start thinking about how we can make it as efficient as possible and as monetary valued as possible, and let's put it into the service of our communities. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't have the answer. I don't know how to do that. And that's why I think ethical studies and policies that will be put into place will be a, 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 a definite factor into how things progress from now on. Because I agree, AI reprocessing, reprocessing text and images and creation and art is an issue. It is an issue when you're an archaeologist and you're a researcher and you're trying desperately to make your idea valid, to spread your thinking, your mode of thinking, and then AI arrives and says, well, actually, are you that original? Because I can do that too. Okay, yes, I see the problem. The problem there needs regulation. And the fact that AI produce unequal gender text, that means that the problem was systemic. It was already there before the technology arrived. So let's try to fix that. Let's use AI to fix systemic problem.
It's critical that we do that because, I help organizations sometimes, and they'll say, we want to implement AI. I'm like, okay, what do you mean by that? And no, we just want to implement. Okay. Or we want you
Why?
AI. Yeah. Why do you want to do that? And we're, okay, here's our workflows and we put in AI. It's like, all right, so are your workflows working seamlessly right now and no problems? No, there's lots of issues. Okay, so basically you're just going to use AI to replicate your problems, like you just said. AI is
Exactly.
replicating the excuse me,
Mhm.
unequal situations with females to males to the point. It's like, okay, how much should I pay my new executive? Well, if they're male, this, female, no, that
Yeah.
should not even be in the
So,
equation, but unfortunately, it is because it's just pulling from, past sins basically, and just putting it forward and making it look fancier. It's like, no, again, this is where the human and the ethical side of things need to be at the table as we continue to educate and populate these AI models to make sure that our world is better because of it, not worse. So I've loved this conversation. Talk to you for hours about all of this. So where can people find you and all this amazing work you're doing?
I have a website, archaeologyforwellbeing.com. For professional contact, LinkedIn is the best way to find me. But I also try to keep an Instagram channel up to date to inspire people. It's not so much about trying to convince you of my methods, it's to see if you can get something out of it, like a spark of curiosity. Or I always say that archaeology matters because it is not expensive, it is not elitist, and it is not reserved for people already fluent in the past. It is created for people to understand how the living have created their identities, how environment has shaped us, and how identities are built, and how community protect one another and grow together when life becomes fragile. So if AI makes you feel endangered, that's when you need to turn to your community. That's when you need to build stronger ties with your human communities. Um, and so this is why Instagram is there to just inspire people to discover a bit more about and yeah, about archaeology and be curious. Um, there's also an exercise. You can download a free ebook from my website or from Instagram, and you'll see what I mean by archaeology for well-being. It's a small exercise that you download it and you can devote whatever time you want to it. So there's a full version and there's a take what you need version. Um, And so I encourage you to just go download the book and try and see if it brings you joy or if it brings you anything, curiosity, joy, a moment of peace, a moment of quiet. So, yeah, I encourage you to do that.
And I'll have all those links in the show notes. So thank you again for your time. Always love our conversations. Thanks again for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.